Hello there, and welcome to episode 9 of the Bamboo Chalupa Digital Marketing Podcast. My name is Brett Snyder. I am the owner of Knucklepuck, and I am joined by my co-host, Nate Shiver, the author of shiverweb.com.
Hello, hello.
So today we are going to be wrapping up our 3-part series on social media and SEO working together. In part 1 of this series, we talked about social media as a ranking factor. A big debate within the SEO community in particular, something that, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get very, very different approaches on whether or not things like Facebook likes, tweets, plus ones and anything actually has a causal impact on your rankings. Then we went in and we talked about using social media to build relationships with key influencers and prospects that you use for your marketing campaigns, which is really the crux of all marketing. But we talked specifically about how to utilize social media platforms to be able to identify, curate, and then leverage those relationships. Both of those episodes are available on bamboochalupa.com. But what you're here for today is part 3 of our series. We are talking today about using social media to amplify our SEO campaigns. Specifically, we're talking about using paid media to amplify content. So we're going to talk about Facebook. We're going to talk about Twitter, StumbleUpon. We're going to go into Reddit and Tumblr. We're going to talk about YouTube, and then even move our way into things like Outbrain and Pinterest, giving you guys a little bit of a preview of what's to come. But we want to talk about using social media, specifically paid media, to amplify your SEO campaigns and help your content reach a broader audience.
Yeah, and Brett, what's really exciting about all these different platforms is that all this stuff, social discovery, social media promotion, whatever you want to call it, it's the absolute bleeding edge of where digital marketing is going. We're going to talk about platforms that are still rolling out. I mean, even Twitter still hasn't completely solidified their ad offering. They're rolling out new features every week, it seems like. And so if you can be an early adopter and really figure this out, because there are no best practices, I think this is a really big chance to really experiment and take your SEO campaigns beyond just keywords, links, manual outreach.
And what's really kind of cool about that when you think about it is these social media platforms, obviously they were generated and built to eventually make money, but they weren't built to be an ad platform. They were built to be a social network, a social community. And then by necessity, because if it doesn't make money, especially, these now Facebook and Twitter, they're now being public companies, if they don't make money, then they don't survive. But it's very interesting that you talk about this as kind of bleeding edge. And I totally agree with you here. But it's because that even the social networks themselves are trying to figure out exactly how they want to manage this, this new advertising platform, and being able to do that while it still maintains the integrity of their network.
Oh yeah, and I think that's really where content has a huge advantage. So if you're producing the right kind of content that's going to work from an organic perspective, that's the same type of thing that's going to work on these social platforms. It's not the kind of thing where they don't want the tacky banner ads slapped up on their sites. They want engaging content or what have you. And so a lot of times there's going to be a good back and forth. And so when we talk about setting goals for, paid amplification, I think a lot of SEOs are really hesitant to spend money, but I think you should spend money if it's going to have a positive ROI and if you have hard goals tied to it. So whenever I start thinking about paying for these platforms, I think about, is it a way for me to sort of take a shortcut to the front of the line? I mean, this is the classic AdWords example, is that, in AdWords, you can pay for that number 1 ranking, for that number 2 ranking in the Google search results. And I think it's the same way on these social platforms. You can spend a lot of time and money and resources building up an organic viral campaign, or you can just pay to test it and see if it'll take off.
And when you talk about that, you also have to think about the fact that, even use Facebook as a great example with talking about how their EdgeRank algorithm really says that your content doesn't reach as many. Even if you have 10,000 people who like your page, it doesn't actually reach all 10,000 of those people. There have been studies that have shown, I'll try to find for the show notes for us, but there was a study that showed basically the shelf life of your Twitter content is about 18 minutes. In that first 18 minutes, you're not getting that content in front of those people. And that's your organic campaign. There's a very high necessity for luck when it comes to these organic campaigns in social. And using paid amplification kind of allows you to level the playing field a little bit to say, all right, I want to make sure that my content is still good, but I want to take that luck factor out of it. I want to make sure that it is still going to reach those folks, even if they're not searching on the network at exactly the window that I publish in the first place.
One of the analogies that I try to use with clients is that down south, I'm in Atlanta. Brett's up north where they actually have snow, but where I'm at, we
up north being Washington D.C. That's up north from the Atlanta kid.
well, at least you have some snow to work with. So down south, we have 1 or 2 snows a year. When we have a snow, it's like half an inch. And so we talk about building a Georgia snowman. And basically that means scrounging around in the yard, scooping up little handfuls of snow and packing a snowball. Like, it's got mud, it's got sticks, but eventually after enough work, we actually have something that we can slowly roll. And once it starts rolling, it's so much easier. And so when we talk about,
and that goes back to just to talk about something you brought up a few episodes ago, that goes back to the flywheel effect.
Oh, yeah.
Where once you get that momentum going, SEO and marketing in general really it's that initial momentum that inhibits a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But once you can get that going, you're able to say, hey, you want to roll that little mud and stick and little bits of snow, you roll it for far enough, you're going to have a better snowman than anybody in New England.
Oh yeah. And when you have a small team, a lot of times it's worth it to pay, the few cents per click or per cents per impression to get that initial traction instead of spending hours and hours of your team's time trying to build up organic visibility. And I think that plays into another goal that comes into promoting on social, is that you can not only get in front of your audience, but you can kind of do it end around on outreach. Last week, Brett talked about, using social media to research and find influencers. Well, if you find, a whole group of influencers, let's say people who have gone to SEO conferences, and you have a small team, and ideally you would love to email all of them to establish a relationship with them. But a lot of times with a small team, you just can't do that. But with paid social, you could do something like build a custom audience and advertise to them directly, at least get visible in front of them. And so, when we talk about doing something is better than doing something perfectly, a lot of times this paid amplification is going to achieve that goal, even if it's not the ideal goal.
And Nate and I have been champions of this idea of integrated marketing from even before we started Bamboo Chalupa. We got to get out of the mindset that, your paid media team is at odds with your SEO team, or that, hey, if the traffic came in from paid media, then that means that the SEO team isn't doing their job. We're all looking to accomplish the same things ultimately, and that's to drive further success for the websites that we work for, whether in an agency or in an in-house role. But we have to get out of this mindset where we look at the analytics and says, well, that means last click is going to give that conversion to PPC. And that means that I can't really make the case to my boss that our SEO campaigns are worthwhile. You have to be able to look at these things as we are all on the same team. We are able to say that, hey, if they could give us a head start, maybe they give us that rocket booster at the beginning and maybe it runs out of gas, meaning maybe we run out of the budget for it, but we've already got that momentum. We've got that flywheel spinning, and then the SEO team can really run with that and do more of the organic promotion that we really specialize in. So we want to be focused very, very specifically on making sure that we do not get too specific, honestly, is to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a corner where we have to say, oh, well, if it's paid, then my SEO team can't use it. That is damaging to, your entire goals for your business.
Yeah. And so as long as you're sticking to your overarching goal, it's like whatever's going to achieve that goal, do it. And what's cool about having this balancing effect is that, we talk about diversity in SEO campaigns, but you also should have diversity in your overall marketing campaign, where you don't have all your eggs in your SEO basket, where you have some backstop with your paid campaigns, some backstop with your social campaigns. And so they're all not only working together, but also helping each other not fall down.
Absolutely. So let's go in and talk a little bit about the audience that we're really talking to, just very, very briefly, touch on the audience. And then we're going to dive into a number of different platforms that you can use to actually amplify your social media, your content campaigns using social media. And so when we talk about audience, I like to break your audience out into kind of three segments when you're talking about your specifically with social media. You have your followers, your influencers, and your engagers. Your followers are the people who really aren't going to be that involved. They're going to read. They're a lot like my wife, where she loves to participate on social media, but she likes to read. She uses it to stay in touch with people in terms of understanding where they are and what life events they're happening. That when you go and you talk to her and you meet her out for a happy hour, she knows the photos you posted, but she's not necessarily one to go and share a lot of information about herself on these social networks. Then you have what are called your influencers. These are the people that like to share, they like to promote, they like to share their own content as well as other people's content. These are the people from a marketing perspective that are really valuable to get in front of. These are the people who on our last episode, we talked about building relationships with. These are the ones that are going to help you continue to amplify that content. And your engagers can be a little bit of both and a little bit of everything else. Your engagers can still be influencers, but your engagers are the folks that are going to be commenting, that they're going to be able to give you feedback on your posts. They're going to let you know whether or not they enjoyed it, what kind of content they're most interested in seeing. And it's important to understand that your audience is going to consist of all three types of people. They're going to have your followers, your influencers, your engagers. And when you look at social amplification, it's super cool because you can segment by demographics, locations, psychographics to be able to learn a little bit about each one of these primary groups to know how is the best way for me to format my campaigns to reach the appropriate people.
So we're going to just quickly run through all the platforms that are out right now. Not all of them, because
not all of them. We'd be here for days.
We'd be here for days. But some of the biggest opportunities that are happening right now in December 2014. And just to keep in mind, these are platforms that again are on the bleeding edge. They're rolling out with new features every day. But even the things that are available in December 2014, the same types of opportunities are going to be along in the next month, whatever the next platform is. There's a quote by Richard Branson. He said, business opportunities are like buses. There's always another one coming. So if you can get in the way of thinking about where your audience is at, what features are rolling out, and how you can best use that, it's going to apply December 2014. It's going to apply in 2015, 2016, wherever this stuff goes. So I've been doing a good bit with Twitter, and everyone knows about Twitter, but not a lot of people have really experimented with Twitter ads. They give you some initial credit to try to, do promoted tweets or promoted followers, but they've really come out with a lot of new direct response type ads. And this is to not just grow your audience on Twitter, but grow your audience on your website. So a lot of the things that we actually talked about last episode, Brett was talking about scraping lists, scraping usernames, finding out what people are interested in Twitter. You can do that same type thing in preparing an ad campaign, and you can build out a very, very specific ad campaign, and an ad campaign that will, by the definition of being on Twitter, will be targeting the influencers and the engagers that Brett was talking about. One feature that I've been actually playing around with today is tailored audiences. And this is something really cool. So you can basically scrape what I did. I found several months ago a giveaway that was going on that was successful. It got a lot of tweets, got a lot of attention. And what I was able to do is basically go through and find all the usernames on Twitter of people who were interested in that giveaway. And I basically could just scrape that, put it into a text file, upload it to Twitter, and Twitter will basically create a lookalike audience that not only includes the people who are interested in it before, but people similar to those people who might be interested in the giveaway that I'm running.
I love that. And I love that phrase, lookalike audiences.
Oh,
We
yeah.
talk about that so much in anything with SEO or marketing, where we got to remember how, we think about, oh, our audience is so small. It's like, it really isn't. You just have to be able to know where to find them. And if you can take advantage of somebody else's work, I think that's brilliant. I think the phrase lookalike audience is the perfect way to describe that.
Oh, and it's especially on platforms on Twitter, Facebook, some of these social platforms that aren't keyword driven. A lot of times advertisers online are used to thinking in keywords, but it's really hard to match up people if they're not using the keywords that you think they're using. And so if you could, Twitter and Facebook are sitting atop mountains and mountains of big data. If you can basically just hand off what you want to them, and you can basically tap into some of the smartest artificial intelligence, big data people ever, and they can create that custom audience for you, something that you would never be able to build offline and never be able to think of online even.
And when you talk about this idea, we've been talking for the better part of a year and a half now that we got to get away from this idea of looking at keywords. Mike King has done some great writing and some great presentations about the idea of using these personas to understand your audience as opposed to keywords. If you want to really get to find somebody who's a real expert when it comes to how do we do, marketing without knowing keywords, read up on what Mike has written about personas and building the personas around your audience, because it really gets you to stop thinking about the fact that, oh, well, what is the transactional activity? The user types in keyword shows ad, user clicks ad. It gets to the point where what is the purpose behind promoting these ads or promoting any sort of content from a marketing perspective? And then what are the need states that people have when they come in and search for that? So we can link to one of my favorite articles from the show notes, but Mike King is definitely somebody who's been a real champion of using that approach for a long, long time. And especially now that keyword information is becoming less and less accurate, it really gets us to think about our audience in a different way and find different ways to actually go out there and use those insights to promote and amplify content through social media.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I love Mike King. We'll link to the article in the show notes. The last thing I'll say about Twitter, we mentioned doing ads that are platform specific. Twitter isn't just because you're not on Twitter doesn't mean Twitter isn't a great place to run ads. Twitter is where all the influencers and engagers hang out. Journalists are famous for pulling stories and sources and getting in touch with people on Twitter. So even if you're a small business, if your goal is to get more press, if your goal is to get links to your site, even if you're not going to get customers through Twitter, Twitter's the type of platform that you can kind of think outside the box and use for that purpose. Just all depends on your goal.
Absolutely. So we're going to keep moving through because we got a couple of different platforms that we want to go to. We want to touch on Facebook ads. And Nate, actually, you gave a great kind of analogy of Facebook and Twitter when it comes to just their ad platform. What was that? Were you talking about the Facebook ads are the Bing to Twitter's Google?
Yeah. I was setting up some ad campaigns on Facebook and setting up some ads on Twitter, and Twitter's interface is just so fluid and smooth, and Facebook's interface is just like, hey, we're the ones with 1.3 billion people. Set up your information our way. And Google AdWords is a nice interface compared to being sort of clunky, awkward, and yeah, it's an analogy that kind of holds.
It is, but it's also something where it shouldn't discourage you from using Facebook, and I just want to kind of intro that because when you go in there, it is going to be overwhelming. It is going to look pretty scattered and clustered. But what you need to remember about Facebook, and we talked about this when we referenced graph search, last week, there is so much opportunity to do demographic, location, behavioral, interest targeting, and segmentation on Facebook that your imagination is the only thing that restricts what you can do as far as amplification on Facebook. You can go and you could sort by people with various, like I said, various interests. You can make sure that it goes specifically at the time of day. Understand that when you're using Facebook, that they do have 1.3 billion people. So you just have to make sure you find the way to filter your goals and the way that you want to promote that content to reach the right segments of that 1.3 billion people. And the idea is we want to go for reach here. Facebook is most successful when we have the opportunity to go and say, all right, it's more of I would almost give a little bit more of an analogy that it's kind of like the shotgun versus trying to use a sniper rifle. You want to go for some things where you're catching a little bit more of the audience. They may have overlapping interests, but what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're aiming for reach in your amplification and that you're constantly iterating what you're doing with your ads, where you can slice and dice your audience and then slice it again and then dice it again. Test different things. Make sure that you can have the right promotion for your content so that it reaches the right audience.
So the next platform we're going to talk about is Reddit. Reddit it's nicknamed the front page of the internet. And the easiest way to think of it is where all the memes and viral stuff that you see on BuzzFeed and Facebook, that's where it originated from. It's where the tastemakers of the internet hang out. I know that sounds...
As a longtime Redditor, Nate loves being a tastemaker.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can look down your nose at everyone on Facebook when people show you some random meme or some crazy news story. You're like, oh, I saw that on Reddit like a week ago. That's where it's from. But that goes into Reddit's strength. If Facebook is where the reach is, Reddit is where the tastemakers and the first viral sort of booster is. So
Reddit, I would almost offer that Reddit is your early adopters when it comes to pushing out content.
Yes. That's perfect term. Early adopters. And so the trick about Reddit is that it gives you huge scale. It gives you access to all the early adopters, but it's very, very tricky to advertise on. And the keys to doing Reddit correctly, I've actually have a post up. Siege Media, Ross Hudgens has also written a lot about doing Reddit advertising right, is to make it personal, to make it not an ad. So you're not going to be able to go on Reddit and just post a banner ad or post, hey, buy my product. You want to make something that is interesting and that plays directly to that audience, and that you spend a lot of time researching the language and the culture of the different subreddits or, kind of focused forums that you can target.
Yeah, I would caution anybody, since I am not nearly the same, Reddit user that Nate is. I would caution anybody without a ton of experience on Reddit to tread very carefully with doing any sort of advertising and promotion here. You want to make sure that it is a very close-knit community. It's a very kind of almost defensive community when it comes to marketing, because they don't want to be taken advantage of. They don't need somebody to tell them what to look at. They're able to find it themselves. That community is very, very organic and very, very protective of the integrity of that community. So when you go and you look at Reddit, like Nate said, you want to make sure that it's personal, that it's anti-ad, that you want to make sure that anything that you're putting out there understands how you expect the audience to respond, and monitor it very, very carefully.
Yeah, that's actually one feature, is that Reddit ads are interactive. So people can actually comment on your ads and give live feedback and upvote it or downvote it, which is basically approving or disapproving of your ad. So it's something where you have to be very active and very engaged with who you're promoting to.
So next thing we're going to talk about, and this is actually a social network that a lot of people forget is a social network, and that's Tumblr. I'll admit I haven't really done a whole lot with Tumblr promotion, but I have read up on it. It is very, very interesting because it's a completely native platform. It's one where they have found a way to work with that community and what that community is interested in to create a couple of different ad options, I guess we'll call them. And one is your sponsored posts. It's the same as kind of what it sounds like on the other platforms. You can sponsor to promote your post, along other Tumblrs. But they also have what are called radar posts, which show up in the Tumblr dashboard. And the Tumblr dashboard allows you to look at a couple of other Tumblrs, the most recent stuff in one place. And think of this almost like the way Facebook ads show up next to your news feed. Your Tumblr radar is almost like your news feed for Tumblr. And having the radar posts in there allow them to show alongside those. And the last kind of option that's really, really cool, and I find actually most interesting about Tumblr advertising, is that you can do what's called your trending blogs. You can actually use that to get more followers on Tumblr. It's almost like the way that you can promote your Twitter profile on Twitter to be able to reach more people on Tumblr. And the reason that this is intriguing, especially to me, is anytime that you can reach the influencer. I come at all of this from a very SEO perspective. That has been really my entire career has been focused on the SEO discipline, within the lens of a more integrated framework. But to be able to reach more influencers or more engagers or more followers, those three types of the audience we talked about earlier, the opportunity to reach more of those actual human beings on the other side of the computer that are going to consume your content That is what's most exciting to me about paid amplification. And I'm really excited to kind of try out the way that Tumblr does that, because they have very, very niche communities. They're around very specific topics where you can find people that, maybe you're not going to have the same 1.3 billion people that Facebook does, but you're going to find people that are very engaged and that they're going to have very, very specific interests that will match up with what your business is looking to achieve.
Also, from a purely SEO perspective, Tumblr is exciting because they actually have websites that are crawlable and indexable by Google.
They do.
Unlike Facebook and Twitter that are more closed off platforms, and so that's especially exciting whenever you can get in front of people who have actual websites. StumbleUpon is they were sort of trendy back in 2007, 2009. I don't know, Brett, were you a heavy user of StumbleUpon 1.0?
I was actually. I was more of a user of StumbleUpon to try to find content ideas. Back before content marketing was a term, we used to use, in the early parts of my career, would go on StumbleUpon to be able to try to find what is it that people are talking about? What is getting interesting? The same way almost that we used to use Dig. I'm not sure if you ever used Dig to find new information. I used StumbleUpon early in my career to be able to understand what, get real insights as to what your audience wants. What content do they respond well to? What do they not respond well to?
Yeah, and so StumbleUpon is, if you haven't picked up, it's a way to stumble upon new content. It's basically a recommendation engine where you log in, you get a toolbar, and you basically click next, and it you tell it what topics you're interested in, and it will pull not a random website, but a website that's come through its algorithm that it thinks you will be interested in, and it shows it to you, and you can either stumble it, which means basically recommend it, like I was interested in this, or not. And over time it learns what you like, and it helps you discover new and interesting content.
Yeah, think of it almost like, I think it's how Last FM, I think, works with music, where it remembers what it is that you are actually interested in. What did you like? What do you listen to most often? And then it recommends different music that is kind of along the lines of that particular topic. So if I listen to a lot of Taylor Swift, which I do, it's going to go and suggest to me other artists that are similar to Taylor Swift, because it learns my interests. It almost learns based on what you have opted into. And it's similar to kind of StumbleUpon's approach.
Yeah, and so StumbleUpon, it kind of fell out of favor in 2011, but it's experienced a resurgence, and it still has several million very, very active users. And what's really cool about StumbleUpon is that it has not only the engagers, but also the influencers that use it, because these are people that are deliberately seeking out new and interesting content, and sharing functions are directly integrated into the StumbleUpon platform. So whenever you find a new and interesting piece of content, you can not only stumble it, you can also share it, like it, tweet it, whatever, directly from that dashboard. And so it has this extra snowball or virality effect built into it. And what's interesting from an advertising perspective is that you can basically pay for stumbles, which basically means that you can select interests, and every 4, 5, 6, whatever their algorithm comes up with, times that someone is clicking next, they basically get shown a paid stumble, and that would be your website, whatever you're promoting, and you pay per stumble. And it's incredibly cheap, something like 15 cents per stumble. It's notoriously bouncy. So stumblers are rapidly clicking. So a lot of times you're not going to get an engaged audience. But what you can do with StumbleUpon is, first off, fill up your remarketing audience. So, you can get them tagged with someone who's might be interested in an ad about whatever your website is about later. And then you can also see if they can take your content and then tweet it out, share it, or even submit it as an organic stumble. And that's one thing that I found with an experiment that I ran on StumbleUpon a few months ago, was I paid for, it's called the engaged visitor option. They make it sound like that it's someone who's less likely to instantly bounce. But what I found is that it's actually someone who's more likely to basically upvote it or stumble it organically, so that you can actually end up with more free stumbles than paid stumbles than you paid for. And in aggregate, get in front of a significant number of people. So it's basically you get in front of a lot of people for a very little amount of money.
So we want to kind of move through the last few of them that we have pretty quickly. We do want to talk about YouTube has an advertising platform. It's called TrueView. You can use either pre-roll, which are the videos that you see before they actually start, or you can use what's almost more common, or the in-display. And the in-display are the ones that kind of pop up in the middle of your video. What I really, really like about YouTube TrueView is when you use it on your own YouTube platform, because you can use it on videos that you already own, because especially the in-display ads are already intrusive. And if somebody's watching a video, and if you're like me and you see the little, I think it's a little yellow marker along the timeline there, and you see, oh, I know an ad's going to pop up in about 20 seconds. The YouTube ads can be intrusive. They are just simply by nature. But if you use it on videos that you already own, you already control, you are able to make sure that you can show your ads at a time where it makes sense for your user. It can complement the content in the videos, and it lets you really be able to say, all right, let's use all of our assets together to go and push those out for what we're looking to do.
Outbrain. So Outbrain is the market leader of several, they call themselves content discovery platforms, paid links. They're one of their top competitors is Taboola, but you mainly know them as the people who put the really sketchy looking links at the bottom of CNN.com or NewYorkTimes.com or Slate.com. All the big publishers, after the article that you've read, down at the bottom, they'll say recommended from around the web or something that's vaguely hints that you're going to be clicking off to another website. Okay, anytime someone clicks on one of those links, they pay the publisher, and Outbrain is kind of the broker. So Outbrain, Taboola, all these are basically a cheap opportunity for you to get onto big publishers' websites and to get in front of followers or people who are just looking to consume content and are interested in a specific type of content, specific vertical.
And these people are already consuming content.
Exactly.
These are publishers, remember. And that's what's really exciting about Outbrain, is because people are already, the users that are going to see these ads aren't people who are searching for new golf clubs or directions to their hair salon. These are people who are already sitting there and reading content on these publisher websites. So you get people that are already in the right mindset to be able to consume more content, because they're already reading some as it is.
Exactly. And you can kind of play off the credibility of the publisher that you're advertising on. If someone is on CNN Money and you own a financial website, you might have a really hard time getting people to come to your blog organically or even through your Facebook or Twitter page. But if you can do an Outbrain link on the CNN Money site, people are interested in money articles, and you can kind of follow in the tailwinds of what CNN Money has already done and get someone to click over to your otherwise kind of boring financial blog to consume the content that you've written. And from there, you can get them into a remarketing audience, or, just kind of make that brand impression on them. So cheap, interesting opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of mentioned remarketing, because we haven't touched on that yet. And I think it's a good way to kind of wrap up this episode, where remarketing, for anybody who's not familiar, are kind of the ads that follow you around the web, the ones that just say, hey, I visited that website, and all of a sudden now I'm seeing ads that are on my friend's blog. And all of a sudden I get this ad for this same pair of shoes that I looked at last week. What remarketing does is it actually cookies people who visit your website, and then using those cookies, it allows you to serve ads to them from other places on the web that have opted in to what's called the display network. Once you have cookied your audience, you're able to follow them and serve ads that are much more specific to what your ongoing goals would be for your site. So, for example, one of my favorite ways to use remarketing that isn't specific for a paid media goal is to actually buy ads on your content, or get people who have viewed your blog post, cookie them, and then actually serve them new ads when you have new blog content that's available. So essentially, instead of just seeing an ad for a product that people are typically used to seeing and kind of say, oh, more ads, more commercials, you're actually able to follow people who have already engaged with, say, your blog, and be able to almost say, hey, we've got a new post. Didn't want you to miss that. You can make sure that you say, hey, if they looked at a particular category page or they read a particular blog post, maybe you can retarget them with a white paper that goes into more detail and gets them into your lead gen funnel. Remarketing is a really, really, really powerful way to actually go out there and be able to continue to keep your audience engaged with your site even after that initial interaction.
All right, so there's some stuff to keep in mind whenever you're going out to trying out paid amplification. First off, make sure you have some sort of goal in place, whether that's number of people in your remarketing audience, whether that's email subscribers, something. Because one thing with all these platforms is that it's really, really easy to just spend money and to spend money on what comes down to vanity metrics. I'm specifically thinking about getting more followers on Twitter or more fans on Facebook. It's really easy to pay for vanity metrics. So you want to make sure that you're running a very limited test, very focused test, and something that ties directly back to your overall goals.
And you also want to do what is called platform native promotion. People are going to consume content on different social platforms differently. It makes sense that you shouldn't have a one-size-fits-all approach for Twitter, Facebook. We didn't talk about LinkedIn or Google+. You shouldn't have this one-size-fits-all approach because your consumers are not one-size-fits-all across all of these platforms. And Joel Kletke, who is somebody who's he writes for Business Casual Copywriting is the name of his site. He actually wrote a post for iAcquire about a year ago, and he talked about this idea of platform native promotion. And he said that you need to adapt your outreach and sharing across platforms to cater to the way users behave there. And I can't think of a better way to sum up that whole concept, where you have to make sure, just like we talked about everything else in this social media series, you want to make sure that what you're doing is catered to the audience on that network. The same can be said for the way that you use paid advertising through those networks, and know that what I'm going to promote on Facebook needs to be catered to my Facebook audience or how people engage on Facebook. What I'm going to use on Twitter or LinkedIn or Pinterest, which we didn't talk about, anything that I might use on Reddit or stumble upon. All of these different platforms have slightly nuanced audiences, and the best campaigns in terms of amplifying content there understand who that audience is and how to appropriately market to them so that they will be able to consume your content in a way that leaves them with a positive, lasting impression.
All right. Well, you can find parts 1 and 2, the show notes, links to things we mentioned, and this show will have a lot of links, and our contact information over at bamboochalupa.com. You can also subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and we love to hear comments and ratings while you're there. It gives us great feedback and it helps others discover the show. So for Brett Snyder, I'm Nate Shiver. Thanks for listening.